welcome to our IATA virtual press conference. As you've noticed, we have brought the time a bit forward. And yes, thank you again for joining us. Before we start, may I just remind all participants to please mute your microphones. And I'd like to welcome our guest speaker today, in addition to, of course, Peter Cerda, who will be going through the presentation shortly. We are joined by Maribel Rodriguez, who is the Senior Vice President, Membership and Commercial from the WTTC, the World Travel and Tourism Council, and she will be providing us a brief update on the effects that COVID-19 is having on the tourism industry in this region. Gracias por acompañarnos de nuevo hoy. Antes de empezar, puedo pedir a todos que pongan sus micrófonos en mute. Quiero también saludar hoy a nuestra invitada especial. Nos va a acompañar también hoy Maribel Rodríguez, la vicepresidenta Membership and Commercial del WTTC, el Consejo Mundial de Viajes y Turismo. Ella nos ofrecerá una breve actualización sobre los efectos del COVID-19 en el turismo de la región. Obrigados a todos, boa tarde. Antes de comenzar, peço a todos os participantes que coloquem sus micrófonos en modo silencioso. Quero dar ainda uma bem-vinda à nossa convidada especial, Maribel Rodriguez, a Senior Vice President Membership e Comercial do WTTC, o Conselho Mundial de Viagens e Turismo, que fornecerá uma breve atualização sobre os efeitos da COVID-19 no turismo da região. And again, before we start, if you would like to ask any questions, please use the chat function. You can ask your questions in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. The presentation and the recording will be made available this afternoon, and we will provide the link. Antes de empezar, como siempre, por favor, si quieren hacer preguntas, por favor, tienen que ponerlo en el funcionamiento de chat. Lo pueden hacer en inglés, español o portugués, y la presentación y la grabación estarán disponibles después de la llamada. Se você gostaria de fazer uma pergunta, por favor, use a função do chat. Você pode fazer as perguntas em inglês, espanhol ou português, e a apresentação e a gravação serão disponibilizadas após da chamada. E então, com isso, Peter, I think you're on the line, so over to you.
Thank you, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. As it has now become customary, we will provide, as Marcus has indicated, a short summary of what has transpired in the industry since the last time we met. And of course, we welcome Maribel from WTTC to provide their perspective. So it's a bit of a joint partnership in today's session. I will cover over the next few minutes the latest passenger figures, the economic impact following the EU restrictions on Latin America, the developments across the region, both Latin American and Caribbean, over the past few weeks, and also, as we've mentioned, we'll receive a briefing from Maribel. And at the end, we will be very happy to take any questions that you may have. Let me start that aviation across the continent is now going into its fourth month of standstill. Even with a few countries having allowed the resumption of service, the majority of the countries are still closing or closed with regards to the borders. The industry on a global scale is expected to suffer a net loss of $84.3 billion for this year, 2020. That's collectively across the world. For Latin America and Caribbean, our airlines based in this region are expected to lose approximately $4 billion this year in 2020. Overall, the demand to, from, and within Latin America and the Caribbean was down by 95.4%, although we saw a little bit of improvement. But for the airlines based in the region, demand was again at a low point with a drop in 98.1% with comparison to last year. So basically, the industry continues to be paralyzed for the vast amount of the region and operation. The resurgence of the new COVID-19 cases in various parts of the world, particularly here in Latin America, are of course creating more uncertainty moving forward. Unfortunately, continued travel restrictions will not help the badly needed restart process. A case in point is the transatlantic market. It is a key revenue earner for many players in this industry. Last week, the European European Union finalized the list of countries whose health situation was deemed safe enough to allow residents to enter the bloc starting January 1st. In the Americas region, only Canada and Uruguay are on the list. The United Kingdom has also come up with their list, in which they also include some of the British Commonwealth islands. Even though the list is reviewed every 2 weeks, the continued border closures will disproportionately hit airlines based in Latin America and the Caribbean. Each month of the EU remaining closed translates into a net loss of about $300 million in airline ticket revenues generated by the Latin American and Caribbean. We are only at the very beginning of a very long and difficult recovery. As an industry, we are working together during all this month with stakeholders in the value chain to ensure that we can restart in line with the globally agreed takeoff guidelines published by the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, in early June. Unfortunately, the situation in several countries in the region where COVID is accelerating is of a major concern. This is putting the industry in an even more complicated situation. Authorities have many challenges ahead of them, and saving lives remains the most important one. Nevertheless, once again, we call on governments not to abandon the industries that are strategic for countries and are key in the recovery. The impact of the virus is having on the air transportation system is exacerbated by the uncertainty of the dates for the reopening of the operations in some countries, coupled with the lack of clear measures to support the sector. This combination is jeopardizing thousands of jobs and contributions to the GDP in our region. For Latin America, we now predict that $98 billion of GDP supported by air transport is at risk, along with 4.1 million jobs. As you can see from the slide, we're expecting revenue losses of between 52 to 81% as compared to 2019 in the many markets. In the past 2 weeks, we have had further airlines in the region apply for financial restructuring under Chapter 11, and it is not ruled out that there will be many more airlines that will have to use the law to alleviate the pressures resulting from the negative effect of the pandemic. IATA predicts that airlines will be consuming cash reserves of $61 billion during the second quarter alone. Therefore, governments are urgently needed to provide the financial release and support that we've been requesting for several months. As Latin America continues to be the epicenter of the COVID in this moment, our projections are getting worse every day, and it's certainly putting us, the region, aviation, at a disadvantage compared to other markets around the world. Aviation has up to now played a crucial role in all economies across the continent. Latin America and the Caribbean simply lacks viable alternatives such as roads or railroads. Therefore, aviation must be allowed to resume as quickly as possible. The necessary guidelines on how aviation can function without becoming a vector of the spread of COVID-19 are outlined in the ICAO takeoff guidelines. These protocols have been devised with both medical and scientific knowledge and clearly spell out how aviation can once again safely fulfill its role as a catalyst for the socio-economic development of the region. However, too many governments are dragging their feet in terms of implementation or proposing options which will impose further operational financial challenges on airlines. In Colombia, this week we had further meetings with the government, in this case with the president of the nation. We again asked for a specific restart date for domestic operations so airlines can have planning certainty. Allowing test flights or vuelos pilotos, in our opinion, are not enough, particularly considering that we've had hundreds of repatriation flights in Colombia that have operated safely and utilizing the protocols. In that country, buses can operate, so aviation must also be given the same options. And we continue to work with them, and we urge the government to maintain the September 1 date for the commencement of international flights. Peru also announced to restart domestic flights next week on July 15th, and we appreciate the government's joint work with the industry to apply the biosecurity protocols harmonized with international standards. So we hope that it will become official that Peru will keep the July 15th date and restart the domestic sector on that date. Ecuador has shown leadership in the restart in the region, but the Ministry of Transport postponement presentation to request the removal of the quarantine has slowed down the process. And we're beginning to see that even with the restart of air travel in Ecuador, people are beginning to stop flying there because of the quarantine measures. We understand the sanitary situation in the country, but we hope the Ecuadorian government will listen to the industry and lift the quarantines as soon as possible. In Argentina, the plans for the reactivations are still on the table, although the date is uncertain. And the government intended to reactivate cabotage in mid-July, but now the possibility has been ruled out because of the current situation, particularly in the city of Buenos Aires. And when we look at the Caribbean, more Caribbean islands are quickly reopening their borders, welcoming back visitors and allowing international flights, as in the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, Bahamas, amongst others. But there we also have the same challenges of some of the protocols being implemented, not being harmonized with the ICAO standards. The Mexican government has confirmed that they are reviewing our request for relief measures, and we received positive response related to our slot waiver request for the upcoming Northern Hemisphere winter season. In Brazil, the lower house of the parliament yesterday voted to classify COVID-19 as a force majeure in the country's air code. And it's also approved a 12-month extension for the assurance of refunds in order to stimulate travel, and terminated the $18 international departure tax. Of course, all these measures are now subject to the approval by the Senate. As we all know, tourism is the main industry in many of our countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, and is heavily reliant on air travel, with more than 90% of travelers to the region arriving by plane. So now I would like to pass the word to Maribel Rodriguez, the Senior Vice President of Membership and Commercial at the World Travel Tourism Council, that will give us some figures about the economic impact across the entire travel and tourism chain in the region. Maribel, bienvenida.
Thank you, Peter. Buenos días. Bon dia. Thank you very much, everyone, for asking me to share some of our information with you. Next, if you can. So for all of you that you don't know, WTTC, we are the tourism body that represents the interest of the travel and tourism sector worldwide, from the most disruptive companies to the most traditional hotels, aviation, airports, travel agencies, all the value chains, dot to dot. What we do is we measure the value of the industry and the impact that we give to the different countries, and we are measuring the global GDP and the employment that is relevant to our industry for 185 countries and 25 regions. Last year, we have contributed worldwide to the 10.3% of the global GDP. Our sector grew 3.5%, which was above the global economy. If you see the figure there, you have seen that over the last 10 years, travel and tourism has always grown above the global economy. When it comes to Latin America, travel and tourism represent as well quite a lot, 8.1% in Latin America and about 15% in the Caribbean, but still a little bit the growth is below the rest of the world. Okay, when it comes to the job, it's almost 8% of the GDP. 15% in Caribbean and almost 8% of the presentation of in Latin America. So if you all can see, very important and impressive figures that were all affected when COVID-19 came into our lives. Next. We have been measuring the impact of COVID-19 in our lives, which is not very good, as you know, and that's why we have been alongside IATA and of all other international associations to put together and to explain what are the measures that we are having and talking to governments for all of them to know how important is the support of our industry to make sure that we are still, of course, as the sanitary conditions are improving, that we are supporting the entire economy, because our industries and the jobs are very well, are pretty much dependent. So we have worked on different scenarios. And if last year we produced 330 million jobs, out of 10 jobs in the entire planet were created due to travel and tourism, we are at a risk. And that is the median scenario above 100 million job loss, which is pretty much a big impact in the entire sector. This pandemic is affecting 5 times that what it was affected in the financial crisis, which is absolutely dramatic. When it comes to Caribbean and Latin America, the impact will be 1.6 in Caribbean in terms of jobs, and 2 million, and the downside scenario would be about 2 million. So it's really, really important that we are working together to make sure that we can minimize this impact. When it comes to Latin America, the baseline scenario would be 6.1 million jobs that could be lost, and 10.4 to the downside scenario. The reason why we are putting the different scenarios is because it's very important that we are working alongside the different governments and the private sector to make sure that the policies implemented are going to be supporting the private sector to make sure that we are still here when things are coming better. Please, next. The bad news that were given already, the good news is that we have been studying 90 crises, and we have demonstrated that we are very resilient. And we have been, if we learn from the past, we have been seeing that if we, 2001, we 26 months to recover from a crisis. In 2018, the median average was 10 months of recovery. Of course, now the actual crisis is without any other precedent, but we are very quick to react, and we are very prepared to make sure that we can cope with anything happen now if we are all aligned and working together. Next. So we have to learn from the past. We have to learn from what we have been doing in the past. And we have already working in different scenarios and working with the entire private sector, and we have been speaking with above 150 government bodies, prime ministers and Minister of Tourism and Transport, and of course, alongside organizations like IATA, ICAO, CLIA, ATC. So the 4 principles for recovery from our organizations are: first, Reopen borders where is needed, when the sanitary conditions are allowed. That means in a coordinated way. In Europe, in the very beginning, they were not coordinated. Now there is a better coordination. They all decide to open borders, but now, but because the coordination was not done well in advance, the bookings are not yet happening as they should. And of course, this is affecting. So our recommendation is just for you to do when you open the borders, don't change the focus. Don't do this message, because this is going to be really bad to the action of the economy. So there are three circumstances. First, the medical. That is very important that we all look at what is happening, the pandemic levels in different countries, to be able to start crossing borders. Second, we have to look at the tourism. What are our source markets? It's very important. Of course, the political conditions are very important, because each country has a different position and view. That's why it's very important, the coordination in the international coordination. We don't approve the barriers. So when they are not essential, we need to eliminate the travel advisories. It's very essential to boost the travel, which prevent the insurance protections and cover for travelers. We know that there is a before and an after. We need to live with the COVID-19, because COVID is still here, till the vaccine is found out, or an alternative to it, like a proper medicine. But for that, we need to cope with the situation, and to make sure that before the vaccine, we integrate testing and contact tracing throughout the traveler journey. That is very important to boost the international travel. And the international travel, the long-haul travel, is extremely important, because some of the big companies that are both part of the globe, connecting each other, connecting dots, they are not only joining the dots, they are hubs, and they are connecting other parts of the world. And of course, after the vaccine, we should integrate, and possibly digitally, a health component through the traveler journey, to make sure that we all are continuing with what we have started now, because the pandemics should be becoming more frequent, or we are now understanding that we are exposed to that. So it's why it's very important, the coordination. We need to adopt global health and safety protocols defined with the travel and tourism sector. Why? Because the health experts, of course, are the ones which are leading the conversation, but we need to give our opinion and to explain the how, to avoid what happened after September 11, which still there is a lot of difficulties to know from the point of the view of a traveler, when I'm traveling to where, what should I do? So this is why it's always very important to adopt global approach, global protocols, and continue, of course, the conversation between the travel, the public and private sector. The government support, the continued government support is very important. We have been working very hard alongside the other organizations to make sure that there's furlough or ERTEs in other countries, to make sure that we can guarantee the jobs and the companies have liquidity, and there are travel and tourism companies out there when the COVID-19 situation is improving, and now when we are all going back to sort of new normal, or the reality that we are facing right now. Next. We have been creating, sorry, that is not a thing from us, but are quite similar. So we have been creating different stamps worldwide. We have been creating protocols in different verticals, hospitality, airlines, and airports, coordinated with, of course, IATA and ICAO. We have been coordinating as well different other protocols for outdoor, for MICE, traveler, for every single vertical that is affecting to all of us, to make sure that now everybody has the recognition of and a stamp. So when the traveler is going back to normal, there is a coordinated approach worldwide. We have as well created a stamp that we are giving to some destinations, if those destinations are following the protocol that we have developed worldwide in a coordinated approach. And the reason why why we are giving them this stamp, which is more a recognition, is to give and bring back the confidence of the traveler, because that is very important. Not that if we open the borders and if we are going back to normal and we are starting operations, it doesn't really mean that the traveler is going to be traveling. We need to bring them back, and the only way to do that is to give them the confidence and the trust of our, of course, industries, and they have to see that we are compiling with a minimum common global protocols. So thank you very much. Any questions? I'm happy to take it. Thanks.
Maribel, thank you very much for your time and for the presentation. I think, once again, both Maribel and ourselves have said again and again, the industry is ready. Travel and tourism, aviation is ready to be reactivated. We have the ICAO protocols that will provide a safe, reliable recovery of travel. But in the end, recovery will depend ultimately if borders are open and demand is there. If the authorities do not facilitate this restart, we will see many more airlines will not be able to resist, and they will be in a cascading effect on their entire supplier, tourism, trade environment that will be very dramatic. So there is a strong risk that we will see less airlines in the future because of the COVID results. With that, I would like to end and open the floor to questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Maribel. And I will now come to the questions. So I have sort of three joined questions, which all have to do with the overall travel experience. So I'll summarize quickly in English, read it out in Spanish, and then I think the first part will probably be Peter and Alejandro to respond to. So the first part of the question, basically in English, has to do with air quality, and if it's more just a perception of people that the air quality on planes is bad, or if this is an actual reality. Entonces, en español original es uno de los más recientes estudios de la IATA sobre las preocupaciones de los usuarios se indica que el aire que se respira a bordo de los aviones inquieta a una parte de los usuarios. Sin embargo, en general se utiliza la tecnología EPA. ¿Es un problema de difusión o un problema real? Entonces, no sé, Alejandro, primero.
Sí, no hay problema. Buenas tardes a todos. Yo diría primero que es un problema más de percepción del pasajero. Efectivamente, el uso de filtros EPA en las aeronaves modernas, pues claramente reducen casi que en un 99% las partículas de aire dentro de la cabina, y lo que hacen es que proveen un aire fresco para que el pasajero pueda respirar y mantienen la circulación además constante del flujo del aire a través del trayecto de vuelo. Entonces, no hay ningún, digamos, inconveniente con eso. Es más que toda una percepción errónea del pasajero. Should I do it?
Yeah, quick in English, and then we'll pass up.
In relation to the question on if the air quality inside the aircraft is more of a misinterpretation or misperception from the passenger than the reality, and in regards to the use that the aircraft are equipped with HEPA filters, these are basically designed to ensure that the cabin air quality is kept at the levels that it needs to be kept in order for passengers to breathe fresh air, and it eliminates almost 99% of the particles that flow within the air cabin throughout the flight. So the air that is being recirculated and produced for passengers to breathe is good air, and there's no risk at all in this cabin air.
Peter, anything you want to add from your perspective?
Just, I would add to what Alejandro said. In addition to the HEPA filters, we need to remember that the cabin is the air circulation is being replaced every 2 to 3 minutes with fresh air, a combination of fresh air, recycled air. So I agree to Alejandro's point. It's more of a perception, but we have scientific evidence and experts who have said that the air quality on board the airplanes are as good as it gets.
Yeah, and I think we also can just mention that the airflow on the aircraft is always sort of top to bottom, so it comes in overhead from the passengers and then gets basically sucked back out into the recirculation system or completely outside of the aircraft, basically underneath the seat. So the flow is more from top to bottom than forwards to backwards. With that, I'd like to move on to a related question, and this has to do with actually getting to the airport. Again, I think especially in Latin America, where in some cases people have to rely on public transport to get to the airport. If there's been any interaction between us and the responsible authorities to ensure that the public transport is also safe. En español, otra de las preocupaciones es la aglomeración de los transportes públicos que llevan a los usuarios al aeropuerto. En general es una responsabilidad directa de las líneas, no es una responsabilidad de las líneas aéreas, pero se puede plantear el tema con las autoridades. So I don't know, Peter, if you want to make a general comment, Spanish, English on that.
Yeah, I'll just mention, no, we haven't had precise discussions with different government officials and municipalities on the ground transportation. It is something that I do know in the vast majority of countries, the issue about ground transportation, buses, taxis, is one that is being addressed. So by default, we feel comfortable that the government are looking into it, taking measures when needed. But we have not directly been in engagements with the authorities. De punto de vista de la industria, directamente no hemos estado coordinando la parte regulatorio, estándares sobre el tema de transporte terrestre con los aeropuertos, pero sí sabemos que el tema de transporte o el modo de transporte por tierra, autobuses, taxis, etcétera, se está manejando por la mayoría de los países, aplicando protocolos para que esos modos de transporte cumplan con las medidas que están implementando en ese país.
Peter, can I maybe help you with a question? Because we have been creating some protocols for transportation alongside different and big groups and companies worldwide. And we are encouraging the destinations to use them and to use for their private sector and check and audit them. Hemos estado trabajando nosotros en WTTC con diferentes organizaciones a nivel global de transporte por carretera, transporte de viajeros, y animamos a las autoridades locales y estamos trabajando con algunas de ellas para que utilicen esos protocolos que estén alineados globalmente, como comentaba, para que esto pueda suceder. Gracias.
Gracias, Maribel. Okay, so we'll just finish off this whole section, and this now relates to if a passenger cannot travel because they're turned away by, for example, temperature checks at airports. Are there any sort of commercial protocols in place? I think we can probably just make a general comment, but it is up to the individual airline on how they then deal with passengers who are found unfit to travel. En español, la denegación de embarque de un pasajero que se revela contagiado no genera problemas legales para las líneas aéreas. Peter, I don't know if you want to just comment generally on that.
I'll just make a general statement. Again, these are either commercial decisions by the airlines or government-imposed regulations that the airline has to follow. But what we have seen from the airline standpoint is that the sector is very open and amicable, that if a passenger does arrive to an airport and he is unfit to travel, the airline does everything within their power to accommodate him when he is in a condition that he will be able to travel safely. En español, todo depende, no puedo hablar en nombre de la línea aérea, cada línea aérea tiene su propia política, pero lo que sí estamos observando, tanto la línea aérea o si la normativa del Estado que obliga a alguna acción, sí vemos que la línea aérea está tomando flexibilidad si un pasajero no está en condiciones de volar por razones de salud, le da las opciones futuras para poder embarcar en el avión una vez que ese pasajero está en las condiciones adecuadas.
Peter, let me jump in again, and maybe I can answer a little bit this question, because this is coming along everywhere and we are having this conversation a lot. We recommend that passengers are using insurance for that, and there is already a lot of companies which are doing specific insurance that are going to be very helpful for all of them, because that is going to make them travel easier. Nosotros estamos recibiendo muchísimas preguntas de este tipo por todo el mundo y ya somos conscientes y tenemos miembros y compañías de seguros que sabemos muy bien que están organizando y preparando paquetes y seguros adecuados para poder viajar y que haya una seguridad tanto a la salida como dentro del destino, en el caso de que se utilicen esos seguros. Gracias.
Gracias, Maribel. Okay, so now I think we can start going around the various countries. So let's go to the south, to Argentina. La primera pregunta de Argentina. Las previsiones iniciales sobre la reanudación de los vuelos en la región se han modificado en los últimos días, particularmente en Argentina, donde se postergó el inicio de los vuelos domésticos previsto para el 15 de julio inicialmente. ¿Cómo ven la situación en ese sentido? Peter, I guess that one's for you. The delayed resumption of domestic service in Argentina and a general outlook on restart of services across the continent.
Bueno, cada día vemos que el inicio se está postergando más y más debido a que la pandemia todavía no ha llegado a un control manejable. Muchos de los gobiernos nos han indicado que van a ser todavía varias semanas antes que lleguemos a un punto alto del número de contagios hasta que empecemos a ver la curva bajando, y eso obviamente no está resultando que se está demorando las reactivaciones. En estos momentos tenemos un poco de confianza que algunos países van a poder ir abriendo. En el Caribe se ha abierto, ya se abrió a principios de junio en Ecuador. Esperemos que el 15 de julio se abran los vuelos domésticos en el Perú. En Argentina ha habido algunos vuelos especiales de cabotaje entre las provincias. Los vuelos de repatriación se están haciendo un poco más fijos al país en Argentina, pero en estos momentos esperamos que la fecha del 1 de septiembre se pueda cumplir. Pero sí hay cierto riesgo que puede ser que veamos más demoras en las reactivaciones debido a la situación de la pandemia que está pegando duro a la región. I'll say very quickly in English. Obviously, because of the spread of the virus and the increasing numbers, many governments are now fearing that the apex of the cases will not begin to go down. So the curve will not begin to go down for several more weeks, and as a result, this is causing many governments to push back the restart of either domestic or international. We have some news we've seen in the last several weeks. In the Caribbean, several countries have reopened their borders. Peru has indicated already they will begin national domestic service next week. But in the cases that we were hoping for cabotage service in Argentina, that has been put on hold for now. In Colombia, we don't have an official restart for the domestic service there either. There are vuelo pilotos, which is somewhat controversial for the industry to apply. But however, we're still hoping for restarts as of September 1 for international flights in both Argentina and Colombia. But it is becoming more of a week-by-week situation to see what the current state of the virus is and how it's impacting that particular country.
Thank you, Peter. Maribel, did you want to make a general comment from the tourism side?
Sorry, no, from the tourism side, thank you. Yeah, no, from the tourism side, what I just to mention is very important that when we are defining a date, we stick to a date, because otherwise the consumers in the other part of the world or in the other part of the region are going to have a lack of confidence, and that is very important now to maintain. Es muy importante que tomemos la fecha que tomemos para empezar los vuelos, y obviamente teniendo en cuenta las condiciones sanitarias, por supuesto, pero que haya una comunicación fluida y no haya cambios, porque eso afectará mucho a la confianza del viajero y es muy importante mantenerla.
Ok, gracias. Bueno, de Argentina vamos a México. Desde la visión de la IATA, ¿qué ha impedido al gobierno mexicano brindar un paquete de ayuda a las líneas aéreas? La ayuda pudo haber evitado cosas como el capítulo 11 de Aeroméxico y, ¿cuál es nuestra visión sobre la decisión de Aeroméxico? Peter, over to you. So, general support for Mexico.
Sí, la situación regional lo hemos comentado varias veces en el pasado. Antes de la pandemia ya la situación en la región era complicada, tanto política, económica, social, que estaba teniendo un impacto grave en la industria. El 2020 tampoco es que teníamos un pronóstico positivo. Teníamos esperanza de que la industria tendría algunas ganancias, pero no comparables a lo que era en Europa o Norteamérica en otras regiones. Llega la pandemia y la situación se empeora todavía más. Estamos entrando en el cuarto mes de cierre de fronteras. En el caso de México no es el caso, pero Aeroméxico siendo una línea aérea internacional donde tiene conectividad en toda la región y otras partes del mundo, eso ha tenido obviamente un impacto, como está teniendo impacto a todas las otras líneas aéreas. Añadimos ahora las restricciones de prácticamente todos los países latinoamericanos para volar a Europa, o que los pasajeros ciudadanos de los países latinoamericanos no puedan ir, pues eso todavía ha empeorado la situación. Y es algo que estábamos nosotros comentando varias veces con ustedes, que cuanto más tiempo se lleva a cabo la pandemia, cuanto más tiempo haya restricciones o cierre de fronteras y sin un apoyo del gobierno de recursos financieros, más hay el riesgo, en el mejor sentido, de que estas compañías tengan que hacer reestructuración de capítulo 11 y en el peor caso, pues que veamos líneas aéreas que tengan que cerrar de una manera permanente porque ya no es propicio de seguir volando, no tienen los recursos. I'll say in English very quickly. The situation was already difficult coming into the year in Latin America with socioeconomic, political unrest. It was already going to be a challenging year for the industry. We were hoping to make a small profit as an industry in Latin America. Obviously, that has now dissipated with the COVID crisis, and we're now going into the fourth month of many of our countries being closed, the EU imposing travel restrictions for the vast majority of countries in Latin America, and obviously this is having a huge effect on the Latin American carriers. So for an airline like Aeroméxico that has a huge amount of their portfolio going international, where in Latin America they can't fly because the borders are closed. Now you have restrictions in the case of the EU. It gets to a point that it becomes very much unbearable, and particularly when you add that they have received no governmental financial assistance as other countries have provided some of the airlines. This is something we've mentioned in many cases, that as the closure of borders or the large percentage of the fleets continue to remain on the ground, there's the greater risk of more airlines having to fold permanently closing or more airlines having to file Chapter 11. And that's the route we are now proceeding more than any other region around the world at this moment.
Before we move on from Mexico, since I have a very specific question in English, on some of the relief measures that we have asked from the government, is there anything you want to comment on? And maybe, I don't know, if Quit, as the country manager, would want to chime in.
Well, let me just say a general statement in terms, over $130 billion estimate has been provided by governments in financial assistance. 1%, if we even get to that, 1% of that financial relief has been provided by our government in this region. So a very small fraction, which really illustrates why we have so many airlines in our region that have either folded or had to file Chapter 11. In the case of Mexico, the relief has been more on the cost side in terms of airport. We've had a little bit of subsidy from the government in some taxes, but very little. I'll let Quit expand if he has.
Peter, let me help you comment on that, because every country that is supporting the private sector will keep us competitive, because it's all about connectivity, and it's very important as well if we have to see employments there. And we have good examples, for example, in Europe, of companies being helped by governments, and it helps maintaining the staff and the operations. Es muy importante que los países apoyen al sector privado, independientemente de que sea aerolínea, hoteles, yo hablo un poquito más amplio, y de esa manera pueden mantener a su país competitivo, mantener la fuerza de trabajo, de empleo, y estar ahí presentes cuando la realidad, la situación vuelva a la normalidad.
Bueno, gracias, Maribel. Y creo que Quit no está en línea por el momento, entonces vamos al Caribe. So we'll head into the Caribbean, and I have a specific question on those islands that are not implementing the protocols according to the ICAO takeoff regulations, if we have some more specifics on that. So I know, Peter, if you want to go, but I believe we also have Annalene who's on the call.
Yeah, I'll let Annalene start it off. She has more visibility in terms of and Alejandro is also on the line.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. For now, I would say that the Caribbean islands that have reopened are very much aligned with our ICAO CART guidelines. Initially, we had some countries requesting testing on arrival, and they have recognized that the cost is also not very sustainable and have reverted to testing prior to departure. So most of the countries that have reopened, they all require testing prior to departure, which is what we recommend. The only thing is the tests that they're still not reliable, cost-effective, scalable, and those are the cautions that we put out there. But most of the general requirement to travel in the Caribbean right now is for you to test prior to departure. Alejandro, I don't know if you want to add anything else at this time.
Thanks, Annalene. No, I would just repeat the fact that the majority of the protocols, if not all, from the Caribbean states are aligned with ICAO document.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I have one more general, which I think is good for all the countries, and it came in English, but I think we need probably response both in English and in Spanish. So, Peter, based on the fact that after almost 4 months of lockdown, Latin American countries are still far from the peak, do we think that authorities basically rushed to ground commercial aviation back in late March, and maybe if the lockdown was too fast with regard to aviation?
No, I think from the industry has not in any moment expressed concern that it was too quick. Remember when we did go down and into lockdown, where countries began to slowly close their borders. We were at a peak in Europe. We were beginning to see significant cases in the U.S. And certainly, leaving borders open would have put even a greater risk in those countries in Latin America. So we do not think, again, and we've always stated and supported the government that in any measure that a state takes for the safe guarding of its citizens is something that we will always support. So we're not challenging or questioning on the steps that were taken back in March.
Okay, and just a short one in Spanish, yes, that would be good.
No estamos cuestionando el cierre de las fronteras en marzo. Ya la pandemia en ese momento de Europa estaba en un momento ya sumamente complicado. Muchos países estaban cerrando sus propias fronteras, poniendo restricciones. Ya estábamos viendo el impacto en Estados Unidos. Poco a poco iban creciendo en nuestra región, no a la magnitud o la rapidez que ahora, pero fue una decisión que la industria apoyó. Siempre hemos indicado que cualquier decisión que algún gobierno tome para salvaguardar la salud de sus ciudadanos, siempre lo vamos a apoyar.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And with that, we have a general one, which I guess is also then back to Peter and possibly Alejandro, just to maybe talk about our multi-layered approaches. I mean, how as an industry can we justify calling for the reopening at a time where there are roughly about 100,000 new infections per day in Latin America, having become like the epicenter of COVID?
Okay, I'll start and then pass it on to Alejandro. There are no scientific evidence that aviation has been a vector of the virus. The protocols that we have put into place are there to safeguard travelers and passengers and employees. We've had over 800 flights in the region for repatriation, and we have not seen the cases spike in those countries because of aviation. So we are very confident that aviation, with the protocols that it has today, is able to transport passengers in a safe and responsible manner, applying the protocols that are in place. We also have to remember that until such time that a vaccine is made available, we will have to learn how to coexist with the virus. So as countries around the world are slowly restarting their economies with aviation involved, we will have to do the same thing in this part of the world. We will have to learn how to coexist. We will have to be, as travelers, take on greater responsibility for their travel experience. The industry has implemented the right protocols with the government approval. Andres, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Maybe I'll just.
Peter, do you mind if I we have to remind as well that during this pandemic period, all the entire travel and tourism sector has been helping and supporting with, for example, hotels became hospitals. They took people, sick people, or even sanitors people. Airlines, they were, transporting medicines. Congress and conventions, they were being as well emergencies. So during the entire period of the pandemic, we have been really supportive, and all the airlines, all the companies, travel and tourism related, they are following rigorous protocols and set plans. So not only now, but as well over the last many years already, because it's very important to keep health and safety properly, and tightly done. Durante el tiempo de la pandemia, pues obviamente, como todos sabéis, aerolíneas, hoteles, centros de convenciones han actuado como lugares de acogida de médicos, enfermeros, personal sanitario, personas enfermas, se ha transportado por trenes, por aviones, medicinas y han sido hospitales de emergencia. Obviamente, en los últimos años, todas las compañías relacionadas con turismo están muy certificadas, están preparadas y están manteniendo sus niveles de sanidad a los niveles y los estándares adecuados y necesarios.
Gracias, Maribel. Alejandro, do you want to just do a quick 2-minute recap of the multi-layered approach?
Sure. Do you want me to do it in Spanish, even if they already answered in English?
The question came in English, so maybe we should do this one in English, and then also considering we have about 5 minutes to go, so I have a few questions lined up.
So just rounding up what Peter was mentioning at the beginning, yes, we are fully prepared to operate given the circumstances that we're currently facing. As Peter was mentioning, we have to live with the virus as it is, and that's a risk that everyone has to take on board. And we're doing the best that we can to minimize or reduce that risk to its minimum. And this is why we came up with the biosafety measures, which basically are a set of measures throughout the entire travel journey that provide the necessary confidence for the passenger to fly again, and also ensure the operational capacity of the airlines to operate in a safe way across countries. So that's in a nutshell.
Can't unmute. Hold on. Sorry, I had problems unmuting. So, yes, thank you very much. And with that, I have a general question on Panama, our sort of request for financial relief from the government, and also our outlook for Panama. I don't know, Peter, if you want to add something on any recent discussions en español.
En español, vale. Seguimos trabajando con el gobierno, hemos estado trabajando muy alineados con ellos en el sentido para ver si logramos reactivar los vuelos cuanto antes. La fluidez de comunicación sigue allí. Todavía no tenemos... el gobierno en estos momentos obviamente está enfocándose de trabajo en lo que es la seguridad y la situación de sus ciudadanos a raíz de la pandemia. De nuestra parte estamos trabajando muy de cerca con el aeropuerto para implementar los protocolos para cuando el gobierno autorice la reactivación estemos listos. Y en estos momentos realmente el enfoque en Panamá es intentar poder reiniciar los vuelos cuanto antes.
Ok, gracias. Y me quedan algunas preguntas sobre la posibilidad que entren más líneas aéreas de low cost en algunos países de la región, como vemos las grandes compañías que se encuentran en el capítulo 11, y si eso pudiera ser una oportunidad para que crezca el mercado de los low costs.
Yo creo que hay oportunidad para los low cost, los híbridos, los tradicionales. El reinicio de nuestro sector va a ser complicada, va a ser difícil, no va a ser organizada. Vamos a tener algunos países que empezarán antes que otros. Conseguir que los viajeros tengan confianza para empezar a viajar va a tardar su tiempo. Al principio seguramente esperamos que la capacidad de vuelos esté en un 40% si tenemos suerte, a bordo de los aviones un 60%, serían unos niveles aceptables. Van a ser unos meses muy difíciles. Que puedan entrar nuevos entrantes a los mercados podría ser, pero en estos momentos no quisiera adelantarme. El enfoque aquí es que podamos reactivar y después cuando las economías se hagan más fuertes, que una vez que los pasajeros empiecen a volar nuevamente, pues yo creo que ya sería más una oportunidad en estos momentos. En el corto plazo lo veo un poco más complicado.
Ok, gracias. Entonces nos quedan casi 2 o 3 minutos. Me quedan 2 preguntas principales. Uno para ti, Peter, que se refieren a la situación general de las compañías aéreas en la región. Si vemos que hayan más que van a entrar en el capítulo 11. Y después tengo una en general para Maribel sobre, el desarrollo del turismo.
Yo no descartaría que no haya más compañías que se tengan que acoger al capítulo 11, sin duda, y tampoco me diría que no van a haber más líneas aéreas que se vean obligados a cerrar la empresa o sus operaciones de una manera permanente. Es una crisis que está teniendo un impacto significativo en la industria. Cada día son millones de dólares que pierden las líneas aéreas. Cada día que no puede una línea aérea utilizar sus aviones para transportar pasajeros es otro día de riesgo que hay menos ingresos en la compañía y más posibilidades de capítulo 11 o incluso el cierre de la empresa. Así que por eso es tan importante reactivar el mercado cuanto antes para intentar salvaguardar la salud de nuestra industria, que en estos momentos está en una situación muy delicada.
Gracias, Peter. Y entonces, Maribel, no sé si tú quieres hacer un comentario en general.
I agree with Peter. It's very important that there's a collaboration, and I insist on this with the public and private sector, because not every company is going to be there alive or will survive if there is not a proper support to make it happen. And this will have implications in the economy and in the employment. So right now, for the development of the travel and tourism industry, is pretty much needed to help now to be there later. Estoy muy de acuerdo con Peter. Obviamente hay algunas empresas que si no son ayudadas en este momento, si no hay una colaboración público-privada, no podrán estar ahí cuando superemos esta pandemia, y eso va a afectar a la economía del país en particular y a su empleo. Por lo cual es muy importante apostar ahora, ayudar ahora a dichas compañías si queremos poder ayudar a desarrollar al país, a cualquier país de la región, una vez que esto esté superado. Es apostar ahora para ganar después, porque el turismo se ha demostrado que en los últimos años ha crecido por encima de la economía y así lo seguirá haciendo gracias a la resiliencia que tiene. Gracias.
Okay, Maribel, una última pregunta. Tengo aquí, ¿cuándo calculan que la situación sobre el turismo se pudiera recuperar del desplome actual? ¿Tenéis alguna previsión de parte de WTTC?
Hay diferentes escenarios, como comentaba antes, y depende también a nivel geográfico del momento pandémico en el que nos encontremos, con lo cual es un poco precipitado para comentarlo, pero todo apunta a que este otoño va a ser muy importante lo que suceda, y por eso el apoyo anterior, para poder empezar un 2021 adecuadamente. Obviamente es muy complicado porque todo depende de cuándo se encuentre o no una solución o una vacuna, con lo cual en ese sentido nosotros no somos lo que tenemos que comentar al respecto, salvo que tenemos que trabajar ahora y actuar y convivir con el COVID y utilizar todos los protocolos necesarios, porque se está demostrando que funcionan. Y pueden ver los casos y lo que está sucediendo en Europa y en China en este momento. So, of course, we don't have a magic, secret here. Of course, it's very important what is going to be happening in the autumn, because and all depends on what is happening with the vaccine or not. But all the protocols that everybody's implementing, and the importance that we have to give to the industry to be there after the pandemic or after the situation. We don't know if the COVID is going to be sorted with the vaccine and when, but we have to look to the numbers in Europe. We have to look to the numbers in Asia, in China more specifically, with the protocols and with the measures, all is possible. So we have to make sure that we are all aligned and working together for the pandemic, using the right protocols, and try to live alongside the COVID, because it's still here, won't be leaving us, and we have to continue our economy and we have to continue with our lives in the better way.
Gracias. Thank you. So with that, we'll come to a close on this week's call. Thank you again for spending the time with us. The presentation and the recording will be made available, and we will send an email to all so you know where you can find those and download those.